Greetings, lovely people, and welcome to another Culture War video, because if it wasn't a Culture War video, I'd be talking about the potential World War III that's coming up, and I really don't want to talk about how the world might end in a nuclear fire. So, we're talking about M&Ms. Oh boy, this is gonna go great.
Watch the rain as it's falling down.
So, a little backstory on my personal affiliation, or a like of M&Ms, I suppose. M&Ms are very much like my favourite candy, my favourite sweet, whatever you want to call them, depending on where you're from, really. And I'm also someone who, while I don't anymore, used to collect a lot of the M&M merchandise surrounding the M&M little characters, which are just anthropomorphic M&Ms with arms, legs, and faces. And I think that's really all I have to say on the matter. Like, realistically, I'm not someone who cared too much about like the advertising of M&Ms, though. It's something that, as someone who has studied advertising, I've looked into at times. I really didn't care that much about the characterization, though I will get into something with this current story. So if you haven't already heard about this, essentially Mars, who own M&Ms, has decided that they're going to be recharacterizing the M&Ms. So they're going to be removing the sexiness of the green M&M. They're going to be removing the prefix of the brown M&M, so she's no longer Miss Brown, she's now Brown. Which, I mean, fair enough, I guess, but like, why? They're going to be making the orange M&M no longer anxious and just more clumsy, and they're going to be making red no longer an asshole. I just don't understand why, honestly. It's been a while since something this kind of pointless has happened. Probably the last time majorly that it happened was with Hasbro dropping Mr. from Mr. Potato Head. And I made a video at the time on that, basically saying that it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, Mr. Potato Head, and Potato Jr. all still exist, just under a new brand name. Like, all of them still had their, like, prefix, their gender pronouns, whatever you want to call them, were there still. It didn't really change anything, and the fact that, especially on the right, people were freaking out about it was just kind of stupid. And I think most people would agree on that one. With this, though, they are literally doing things that make no sense. So, as I say, they are essentially taking away the quote-unquote sexiness of the green M&M, which it's always been a controversial subject from my point of view. I've always seen a lot of people discussing, like, why is this candy mascot, like, sexualized? But it's just a character trait that she was given and has had pretty much since they were introduced as these characters. So I've never questioned it that much. But essentially what they're doing with this new redesign is taking her go-go boots, which she's had since probably around the 80s, and replacing them with sneakers, which really on paper that's perfectly fine. But then they also, and I'm going to use something that I actually saw in the discussions around this on Twitter, they've de-yesified her. So she's no longer in a very Yas Queen type pose, and it's difficult to like explain what that really means, but it's less flamboyant, it's less, I don't even know if overly feminized would be the way of saying it, but essentially she's no longer in a very, eccentric pose. She's now just in a bit of a neutral pose, and even in the new M&M's little trailer announcing this change, she goes from what she normally does, which is stand around, one leg pointed out and stuff, and hand on hip and stuff like that, to just leaning against red. So, in my mind, and this is completely just from my point of view, just looking at the new materials that they've released, they've just made her a tomboy. And that's a whole controversial subject right now anyway, because people are trying to ban the term tomboy. I'm not going to get into that, it's not something that I care enough about to actually say about, but like, yeah, it does appear that they're just turning green into a tomboy, going from like one extreme of femininity to the other, I'd almost say, like going from absolute like femininity to more masculine approach, which I don't think does what they want it to do. I feel like that actually kind of goes against their entire idea of making inclusive characters, because that is Mars's entire point with this. They want to make their characters more approachable, I suppose. They want to make them more relatable, and they've done that by changing some of the more relatable aspects of the different characters. So I did say before about how Red and Orange have very distinct personalities. They're also changing those. So with Orange, who has always been my favourite, I have a lot of little figures and stuff of him. He is an anxiety-filled mess, just like me, which is very relatable. I love that so much. He is also pretty much known for not having tied shoelaces in the animations and stuff. It's not something that you really see that much in the branding generally. On packets, he has tied laces, and in a lot of the merchandise and figures and stuff like that, he has tied laces. But in the animations, in the adverts, he would have loose laces. He wouldn't have them tied. I didn't see this as much of an issue because I just saw it as like he's panicking, he's running around, he doesn't have time to tie his laces because he's panicking about what he needs to do, which I thought was well in character. They've now decided that they're going to have him have tied laces, and he's going to be less on the side of anxiety and more on the side of just being a bit worried about things and just generally a little bit, not just a bit clumsy, a little bit like frazzled, and just generally just, I don't know. It's difficult to kind of explain in quite honestly, quite honestly, I cannot talk. But yeah, it's one of those things that I'm like, this has taken a character that I really did like, as weird as it sounds for me to relate to a food mascot, I did relate to Orange quite a lot in his depictions in the adverts, which is a huge shame if they're going to be changing him a decent amount to make him apparently more relatable. But I'd argue that having an anxiety-filled character is actually way more relatable, especially to Gen Y and Gen Z, than having someone that's just a little bit clumsy and a little bit panicked. I don't know, they've turned down the levels, and I feel like that's actually making him less relatable to a lot of people, because a lot of people are on extremes. Like, as weird as it sounds, neutrality isn't a common trait of people. People are more likely to be on the extreme side of something. So, yes, while Green may be known as being calm and confident, and Orange was known as being a little bit on the opposite end of that, of just being a bit anxiety-filled and a bit, all over the place, a bit, kind of out there, they've tuned both of them in so that Green is just kind of casually, confident in a way that's just like very neutral, and then Orange is a little bit panicked, but just in I'm a little bit late for this thing sort of way, rather than I'm going to die if I don't make it to this destination in time sort of way, which I know isn't necessarily the most healthy way of thinking to begin with, but it is how many people, including myself and a lot of my family, do actually function in just society. I get really panicky if I'm even like a minute later than I think I should be. And a lot of the time that still ends up with me being early to something. But in any case, regardless of my anecdotes, Orange was something that I related to, was a character in fiction that I did really relate to. So it's a shame to kind of see that taken away. And as I say, this is very much something that you can just disregard. Mars, they're doing it just so that they can please shareholders and stuff like that. I understand that completely. I just, as someone who is a pretty big fan of the M&M brand and the characters within it, it seems a bit wrong. And that does bring us on to Red, who, when it comes to Red, he's not a character I've ever been that fond of, but I mean, I know a lot of people do actually like his antics within the animated series and the stuff like that, the actual adverts. He was an asshole. Plain and simple, that was his character trait. He was a bit of an angry, mean guy. And they've basically said, we're going to tune that down so he's no longer angry and mean. So he's just a neutral character, like any other one. And the thing that really bugs me the most about this is that Red was part of an iconic duo, which is based on archetypes of duos that goes back for tens, maybe even hundreds of years. The idea of having one consistently angry know-it-all and one kind of dumb, kind of slow idiot. That was Red and Yellow's dynamic. That was consistently the characterization that they shared. That Yellow was the foil to Red. It's almost like a Pinky in the Brain situation, and the fact that they're tuning Red down so much, while as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm aware, they're not doing anything to Yellow, to me that almost just emphasizes the stupidity of Yellow with no foil for him. There's no inverse of him, there's no inverse of his position, so they're just making it out that stupidity's a worthwhile trait to have in something, but having someone be grumpy, a little bit angry, a bit of a know-it-all, that's not a worthwhile trait to have in a character, even to offset a character like Yellow. And it's such a weird thing for them to do. On top of that, they are decreasing the heal size for Brown, as well as removing Miss from her name. I don't really care about the Miss part. I don't really care about the heals, to be fair. She's a character that's a no-nonsense, proud lesbian, basically. So, yeah, I don't really mind all too much about what they do with her. Like, she's already a pretty neutral character to begin with, and the thing is, she was always a representation of the slightly smug, like, neutral, know-it-all character. That's, a lot of people would say it themselves, and I wouldn't disagree. Kind of like a Dom character, kind of like she's in charge and she knows she's in charge sort of character. And I don't think anything that they've done to her has really changed that. So in terms of Brown, like, she is how she always has been. But yeah, it's just a really weird thing. The final one, of course, is Blue, who, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been changed at all. He's always just been the cool guy. Once again, just like Brown, kind of a neutral character. And that's the thing that kind of confuses me the most about the fact that they're making these changes to green, red, and orange, is the fact that we already had very neutral characters. Why do we need to make all of them more neutral? At the end of the day, I don't really care if they're going to start making the green M&M less sexy. It doesn't matter to me. I wasn't wanting to bang the M&Ms, their mascots, for a food brand that I like, and that's really all they've ever been to me. I do like them, as I say, as characters. I've always thought they were fun. I always thought that they were, like, one of the better representations of, like, a food mascot in animated advertising. But, yeah, I'd be lying if I said that this is really going to affect me in the long run. I just thought it was worth talking about, especially when so many people on the right have been kind of freaking out about it, including, like, Tucker Carlson did an entire segment on his show about it, which, oh boy, imagine you tune into to Fox and they're ranting about how the brown M&M has shorter stilettos. Like, it's just, I can't imagine being on the right whenever social commentary or a whole, this entire war on culture, whenever this stuff comes up, I'm just like, imagine being the kind of person where your side is the reactionary side to this. Like, it seems so ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I'm not helping. I'm also discussing it. I'm also giving my thoughts. But yeah, I don't care. Quite honestly, this is something that, like, I'm prone to being a bit more connected to something like this than most things. Mr. Potato Head is something that I grew up with, but it wasn't something that I actively cared about. M&Ms is something that I do actively care about. I buy M&Ms on a regular basis. Whenever I go to London, I go to M&M World. I often buy the merchandise, as I said before. I've even played a lot of the games that they've released over time. There's the M&M Kart Racer and the M&M Platformer and stuff. Like, they're all bad games and stuff, but I've played them because I like the brand, I like the characters, and yeah, it just seems so weird that they're doing stuff like this, especially when, and this was a very funny thing, a lot of the articles said that Mars had previously seen flack, a bit of complaint around, like, the sexiness of Green. But that complaint, those, arguments against that character are from the 90s. So it's taken probably around 30 years for Mars to actually respond to this criticism. So was it really criticism that needed to be answered? That's the question that I have, at least. But in any case, I'm going to leave it there. Tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm actually kind of interested. Like, are you a fan of the M&M marketing? Is it something that you've ever really took that much notice of? As I say, it's something that I always enjoyed seeing when I did watch TV long time ago. And it was something that I was very interested in looking back at when I started studying advertising. But generally, it's not something that's, like, a major part of my life. And yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting little bit of culture war. And I don't know. I think this one's actually a lot more interesting than the whole Mr. Potato Head thing because nothing really happened in that case. This one's actually, like, got changes that are noticeable. So I do wonder what you guys think. But in any case, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like it, subscribe if you're new around here, and ring that bell so you never miss an upload. Otherwise, it's going to be it from me, and yeah, see you next time. Bye!
It's been a long week. I feel like I could use a vacation. I can hardly think. It's like the worst song you